Yes. Are we live? No.
This is Duvid. We are live. I have a special guest from Singapore, Wyatt, who I have shared on Week in Review a few times now. And I was basically just looking for good content, trying to figure out, God forbid, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And I was looking around for content, and I came across Wyatt, and he's got this wonderful YouTube page, wonderful web page, and it has maps. Let me just make sure I'm live. I think it I should be live. I just want to make sure this is going and check my YouTube page so I don't have to ramble. So I got people waiting. So no, I don't think I went live. Let me see what happens.
Hey, let's do you.
Two cameras. I apologize. Hopefully, sorry for the technical difficulties. It appears I'm not actually live. Actually, just tell me I'm live. So,
It's still on schedule, at least on the YouTube. 8 waiting.
Oh man, I hope I don't have to create a new link. Okay, so I apologize that we were live the whole time. Sorry for the.
It's live already. Yeah.
Okay,
It
so
just
we are live.
the live.
Okay, so I apologize that we were live the whole time. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I saw myself now.
Okay, so I apologize about that. So my new friend from Singapore, Wyatt, who has this wonderful YouTube page, and called Defense Politics Asia, and from what I've seen, it is really the best information I have found on what's going on in Ukraine and in Russia, and it's largely mapped. So it has a news page, so you can see here. Just show briefly his YouTube page, and you can see these regular updates of the situation in Ukraine, and in a map intensive where he has a GIS, geographic information system, where you could on his webpage you could actually click on a map and see dots, and it'll show recent updates, and he's doing all sorts of research into what's exactly happening, where it's happening, and so if people actually want to know what is up to date happening in terms of military news, so this is the best information that I've found on it. So I guess his YouTube is growing, and I was able to reach out and join his Discord, and we spoke a little bit, and I asked him if he'd come on and do an interview, and he agreed. So here I give you Wyatt. So if you want to open with some sort of biographical information, just who you are, how you came to create your media business, and then I'll let you show your webpage, how it works, how people can get the information on the ground of what's happening, and then hopefully we'll get some insight into this God forbid conflict in Ukraine, Russia.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Wyatt. Wyatt Mingji Lim. That's my full name, so you can just call me Wyatt. I'm the managing editor of Defense Politics Asia. I have actually managing Defense Politics Asia have been around for quite a few years already. We only have a website, and we have some of our social media accounts, and then I had created the YouTube channel maybe 1-2 years ago, but we didn't really do much about it. And until until the start of the war, we only have 20 subscribers right at the first day of the war. And then I was, because during the lead up to the Ukraine war, I have noticed that there's a lot of misinformation already. The media is not doing their part to stop the war. They are actually encouraging the war. They are trying to discredit, Putin and the Russian threats. And that's where we are, because nobody took their threats seriously because of how the way the media portrayed, how the governments of the Europe has been behaving, the way how they react to the threats. And then Putin have no choice. He had to follow through with his threat, and then now we have a war and innocent people have to die. And immediately we saw that everything is a mess, and then we cannot get good information. And then people, the cities' names are being thrown everywhere.
Well, you want to start earlier, and you'll go back to, because obviously you had your media and webpage set up before the conflict in Russia and Ukraine to be able to you do this reporting that is caused your channel to take off. But like, how did you end up creating this webpage and media platform? I mean, it looks like if I saw your webpage, it's it may be a few years old. You had a partner, and your partner left, and for the last year you've been managing it yourself.
So okay, let's go back. Let's trace back to the Defense Politics Asia first. Defense Politics Asia started off with me and a friend, and then his name is Timothy So. He writes very good military stuff, and then he was writing a lot on Quora. So I was telling him that it's a waste, because I think that he should put this in a platform that you actually owns the article. And then because I myself like geopolitical stuff, and then I do write myself as well. So I thought that why not we create a website, then we can put our stuff there, and then we can call ourselves a think tank. And that's what DPA was in the earlier days, where we are actually operating more like a think tank. We write our opinions, our interpretations of what is actually happening, and then personally on my part, for me, I'm actually trying to write clearly what is actually happening, and not because there's a lot of fake news during those quite a few years back already. So fake news and misinformation is already very bad. So I started. I have my personal mission is to actually to bring clarity to the issues that is happening around the world, especially with a focus on Asia, because we are based in Singapore, and then we are very connected to the West as well. So we have a good view of both East and West in a way. So I think that provides a very interesting perspective. So unfortunately, we have a fallout with between me and team, and then end up he left. So he deleted everything already. So there's nothing left in the website of his, but you can still visit Quora to look for him, Timothy. So his writing is very good. He's actually very good in terms of military stuff, which is I'm not very good at. So after he left, I decided that DPA need a revamp, because I always thought that DPA need to grow bigger, and then I decided to do a big revamp. I actually ejected the very few patrons that we have, the patrons in the Patreon that we have, and I actually informed them that there's a revamp, there's a management change, and then after that, everything start from zero again in a way. So although I still take over the Twitter and the Facebook page, so I still have the existing followers, but from there I revamp the entire branding, what content that we put out. So in the new DPA, instead of just a very opinion think tank thing, it became more towards like a news media kind of thing, with additional think tank, like the kind of opinion articles. So I cover a lot more in terms of news and articles. Usually I take a existing article, and then I take out only the important points, and then I quote them, so that people don't read all the misinformation part of things. Like just focus on the clarity, the real information that is actually in the article. So then that is actually how I operate. I like to just point out the very fact rather than we get confused by the adjectives and all the way how they frame things. And
Was
that's
it
where
always
we
the
are.
English language page, or do you have also in other languages?
It's only English, because English is actually my first language. No, regardless how I actually speak English. So Chinese is my second language. I can speak Malay as well.
And so when you started, it was more military, and if you branched out into, I say on the webpage you have finance, economics, international affairs, geopolitics, and
Yeah.
military.
So the main there's actually more the four, like what you mentioned, the four main sections. We have geopolitics, military, internal affairs is actually internal politics. That means national politics within the country, and then we have economics. Economics is always the finance and economics is always the poor cousin, because I don't know enough to actually write a lot about it. And then my focus is more towards geopolitics. Internal affairs are local politics, which I think sometimes is very important. And then I do try to write about it if I know anything. And then military stuff used to be the domain for Timothy, because he write a lot on military stuff, and I don't know enough about military stuff. And then so slowly we'll try to expand the team and see what we can do. So now the military stuff is now all Ukraine at this moment.
Are you the only one posting articles, or do you have other people occasionally post articles?
I have some contributors, but all their stuff is now all hidden already because of how much things I have been posting about Ukraine war. It's like they all went down.
So you said your background is in graphic design.
So my education, I'm actually in digital media. I actually studied digital media design with a specialization in games design. So actually, I'm trained to be a games designer. Then after that, I went to army. I served in the regular force for 6 years, and then I was a professional soldier for 6 years. Within the intelligence umbrella, which I cannot tell more about. Then after that, when I left, during those days, I actually went to study visual comms. Basically, it's actually corporate design. And then after I left the army, that's where I went. I started to do professional design work in terms of branding, graphic design, web design. And then my business continues to do till today in terms of the graphic and branding design part of.
Just for other people, whatever people hire you to make for them.
Sorry, again?
You'll make just a design webpage or stuff for whatever people hire you to make.
Yes, something like this. So in terms of like, you can do logos, branding, website, posters, brochures, booklets, and whatnot.
I mean, it's pretty generic business, popular business, good business, because it's a relative. I mean, there's a reasonable amount of people that have that skill, but the amount of people that need that service, it's a relatively good
Correct.
profession. But here you're doing it for your own business as opposed for other people. So the part that made me appreciate your work so much was the mapping, and so because I have worked. I'm a civil engineer. And I've worked with GIS, Global Information Systems, variously. Here in the U.S., most departments of buildings that regulate building permits have GIS public government pages that you could click on a city and look at a house, and it'll connect to the various other government agencies like the House of Mortgages or building violations and various things where it's just a map, and then you click on the map and the map will take you to places of information. And then for larger, which I never worked in, but took some classes and read up about, of global information systems for infrastructure, things like floodplains and weather. It's an exceptional technology, and so that was, in my eyes, the main benefit of your coverage was, I mean, obviously you do a lot of research, have the information, but was your mapping of what's happening. So I'm not sure if you could do a screen share if you wanted to do your own overview of your web page and kind of how your map works, how people could go to your web page and use your map in order to understand what's happening right now, specifically Ukraine and Russia, and then maybe we'll talk general geopolitics, because like you said, it's the news driving. So the Ukraine-Russia conflict has driven up your sub count and people, the traffic to your webpage, just like me, that I found your page searching for good information on this conflict.
Okay, so let me share the screen. Share screen. Let's which is one. Share. So this is the Defense Politics Asia. So I have actually a few maps. So this is the world map, which I put all the major events. So if you need to, you can click this Ukraine one, and then you can go to the Ukraine focus page, where you can actually find this map. So this is actually, you can see it's google.com/maps in the URL. This is actually a Google Map sub app. It's actually called My Map. So this is this one, anyone can actually create this. So if you go to the web page, defensepoliticsasia.com/Ukraine, this is actually the map. It's exactly the same map. If you press this open, you can actually go back to the same place. So if you press this one, so it's actually the same thing. If you want to see previous days, you can click this one. You can actually see some of the previous day, but there will only be 10 days all the time, because that's the maximum number of layers that I can put. So there's only 10 layers. So I only put 10 days, but at least I try to put 1, 7, 15, 25. At least you can get a general picture how it went.
In the YouTube that I've linked in the description has Wyatt talking through the daily news using the map, and I guess you don't even have your face overlaid on it. I guess so. Your videos are basically just the map, and you talk through. I mean, you could add your face or like an icon or logo there, and maybe it's kind of your gaming background where it's. I mean, God forbid to compare it to a video game, but that it's even comparable to some like a video game, war game, to to looking what's going on. But I mean, God forbid it's not a video game. This is real.
Correct. So because I personally like to play a lot of war games, so to me it's very natural. Like some games like Europa Universalis, so it's always this kind of map, and everything is just in one look. The entire strategic picture, and that's how I'm visually geared towards viewing the situation. And in terms of just now you talk about, I think the faces, right? I didn't show my face on the YouTube. Is that I think that inherently we are all a bit racist. So by putting in my face, I believe that will kind of pull people out of the information I'm trying to present. So people say, "Oh, he's just a Chinese guy," Then so I try not to.
I try to be neutral. I just wanted the facts, and that's what we were meant. Is like it's not about you. It's about
correct. It's not about me.
But I mean, to some extent, it is about you. And we'll talk about the geopolitics, because like in America, in large parts of the West, you could be banned, you could be censored, you could be canceled for being pro-Russia, because we could talk theology a little later, but I mean the fact is we're born part of nations and peoples and the conflict, and so you could look at it like objectively, try to understand what's happening, what everyone's motives are. But we're born onto sides. We're part of nations, and our nations have treaties and alliances, and so the media here in America is not really giving the facts, but it's not necessarily the goal of the media in general to give the facts, especially
really.
But and that's why I came onto your page, because I didn't need I mean, people could decide their moral or politics on their own. I wanted to know what was actually happening, and it was obvious to me. I'll let you continue describing how your page works, and then we'll get into your kind of assessment of what's actually happening on the ground. If you use even the term "who's winning" or what's actually happening, what's propaganda, because he's obviously, Wyatt is taking all sorts of information. He's taking the Ukrainian propaganda, the Russian propaganda. He's using really ingenious methods to figure out like fire maps and all sorts of crowdsourcing of information just to map what's actually happening on the ground.
So let me start off with the motivation, because I personally face the same problem of finding to understand what is happening, and I want the facts. And from the things that I see, especially on Twitter, it's just full of misinformation, full of like either pro Russian or pro Ukrainian views, and it just clouds what we are seeing, and it's actually very tiring to actually go through all of them. So I decided to, like, since I have DPA, Defense Politics Asia, I might as well just cover the war, and then I just plot things out to at least have a sensing. I wouldn't be embarrassed to tell you that actually I'm very inspired by UA Maps. So I believe everybody know UA Maps, right? This one.
No, I'm not sure if you want to explain that.
So this is Live UA Map. Actually, is a Ukrainian company, news company. So
well,
this
I shared that on. I did share that, although
Yeah.
most people probably aren't familiar with it. And I saw
Correct.
this popular U.S. page called Task and I think it Task and
Purpose is right.
And so I saw that they shared that, and then I shared that from them. And then, but they haven't even put up a video in the last 2 weeks. That was the only thing comparable to what I saw you doing. Task and Purpose, and another page also had a map but no voice.
Mm-hmm. So UA Map is actually one of my how to say, I really love the way how they present information, and I actually followed them for some time. But this is a Ukrainian company, and how they started off, I believe, why is it called UA Map? Is because UA is actually represent Ukraine, so it's actually Live Ukraine Map. They started off trying to cover the Donbass civil war, and then from there they got so much coverage, so much followers, that they actually started to cover Syria and all around the world. They actually grew very big, and I really like the way they present information. And then that's what I try to replicate over on my website. Actually, just before I go to Ukraine first, I want to show that actually I did try to do that in Myanmar as well, but after that I kind of like stopped because I didn't manage to able to follow through. And the map I used then for the coverage was not Google Map. It was a separate. It's actually a open map. This, you see, it's already broken. I don't know why. So I was covering the Myanmar one with a different app. So when I came to the Ukraine one, when it happened, I realized I need something very fast. So I actually look at what Google Map have, and I actually realized that this actually works pretty well. So this is how I started. So do you want me to talk about the war?
Yeah, so I appreciate giving a nice overview of your your webpage, your media company, and how you came to use these mappings. And that's how I found you, and why I thought that your new service was valuable. That you're like, why am I here in America using a news service in Singapore? Because you're one thing is more neutral, and specifically the mapping. So you have a lot of videos. So if you want a little insight on what's happening in Ukraine or Russia, minus the propaganda, like us here in the West, we know what we're being told, or possibly, we could talk later about the geopolitics. I'm not sure if Singapore is neutral, or your situation, if you might even be allied with Russia, but it's somewhat irrelevant to
All right.
the facts of what's actually happening, regardless of whose side you're on, who you think is right or wrong, what's actually happening on the ground.
So so I will not go into details into how the war progressed. I can just show you about how, like, this is day one. This is the information I kind of gathered on day one. There is a fight on 5 fronts, and then by day 7, you can see that the Russians have already spread out, except for the Donbass area. They are still not really doing very well.
Did you have this set for day one? I mean, no, I was surprised. I had heard in the news that that Russia might invade, and that they certainly had. Yeah, I follow the news. I read the New York Times, many newspapers, Israeli papers, every day, and they reported that it was possible that Russia was going to invade, and then they did it. Were you thinking about covering this, or were you covering it before it happened to even have day one?
I actually was covering before that. So oh my god, how do I, because so much has happened. Let me go to this one.
Were
I
you
want to
covering
show.
the troop buildup before the
Yes.
actual invasion?
So I was actually warning against trying to test Putin. So let me see.
I came onto your page in the first week, so where you were just kind of exponentially increasing, but like in the first week of the conflict, I came across your page, but so you saw this coming. You've been doing military
Yeah.
news for a while, and you saw this coming, as opposed to most of us that didn't follow this were largely shocked by it.
So it didn't come as a shock to me that the Russians will actually attack into Ukraine, but it came as a shock only to me because they invaded directly from Russia. That's the only thing that I was shocked. I thought that the war will only be from Donbass into Ukraine, like what they did in Georgia. So in the Georgian war, the Russians did not invade directly from Russia. They only invaded through the rebel territories into Georgia. So I actually wrote an article then on the 15th of Feb that the Russians will not invade unless the whatever reasons that. Then after that, then the Russians move into Donbass. Then I wrote Donbass is the final warning, because during those time at that was 22nd of Feb, the Russians have very clear demands of the Ukrainians, and then the Ukrainians have been ignoring them. And then so when they move troops into Donbass and there's nothing Ukraine can do about it, I wrote that this was the final warning. And if they do not still try to calm down the tension, then an invasion will happen. This is what I was. So actually I was already anticipating an invasion already. It's just that when the invasion come, I got shocked that they actually came through directly from Russia. And I just want to share. There is no forces, as far as I understand, that came directly from the Belarus. So the one that they say is from Belarus is actually from this point. These are tri-border. There's actually Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. So they actually go through this junction to come into the Chernihiv front here. So I just want to share this part. So the Russians have this weird sense of chivalry, where they say something, then they will do it, and then they will follow through with certain rules and principles that they set for themselves. So this is just like something that I have observed. So I just want to continue with just now what I started. Then so by day 15, this is what happened. It just continued to expand further, and then by day 25, you can see that the growth of the territory that Russian can control. So this is something I want to share. I think I tried to share in my channel as well, that the entire narrative that the Russian is losing is nonsensical. So it doesn't correlate to what is happening on the ground. So how do I actually judge what is real and what is fake? Is one of the things is that it does not matter how many soldiers are killed. It doesn't matter what tank is destroyed. It doesn't matter how many POWs and how many surrendered, or the alleged morale situation. What matters is what is the land that they have captured. What are the lands that the Ukrainians have recaptured, and this is the reality on the ground. This is the reality. It does not matter what comes next later, but this is the reality. So as far as the reality goes, other than some slight pushback from the Ukrainians, the Russians have actually pushed up to this border and they have secured it. And they are continuing to try to make push on the eastern front. So this is the reality. It does not. So a lot of the pro-Ukrainian crowd, they have been like, even in my YouTube comments, they are always like saying the Russians are losing. But how are they losing? All I care is the land. If the Ukrainians did not capture any land, then they are not winning. So this is how I operate. Do you want me to share how I look at my sources?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I mean, it's in the narrative.
Yeah,
the narrative doesn't really matter. I mean, geopolitics is extremely complicated. People who want the facts have to do a lot of hard work and research. So if you just read a news article, or even credible sources like the New York Times, you say, okay, Russia, completely unprovoked. And then I warn people about assuming motives. That that you say, okay, the reason why Putin wants this, and this, even though that's not what he said. as opposed to what's actually being said. So I mean, you're pretty good at ciphering through the propaganda, and I have a background in I minored in psychology, and just the way consciousness and the human mind works, and narrative, and most people most people didn't serve in the military, most people have no military expertise, most people violence is abhorrent or scary to them, that it's going to be beyond the grasp of the average person to objectively look at war maps, because that's not how the human mind operates. But those who really want to know the facts of what's going on, saying like these are the cold hard facts. So yeah, please share how you sift through the propaganda, how you try to figure out what's real and fake.
Okay, so I go back to just now what I said about the territory that you capture. So every city and towns and villages is important. That's what we are tracking. Did they capture a town? Did they capture a village? So the border will move, and that's what you want to know. So it does not matter that you destroy 100 tanks of Russia.
Well, it does matter. Obviously,
they capture half of Ukraine, right?
I mean, it may not mean that Russia is going to lose the war, but obviously, people getting killed and
correct. So
weaponry being destroyed is significant, even
correct.
from a military perspective.
So this is the base that people need to understand about, trying to understand what is the facts, because there is no point that you destroy 1,000 tanks and then Ukraine got conquered. Like it makes no logical sense. So this is why I ask people to detach themselves. So when you go, so this is Telegram. You can see that I have ridiculous amount of Telegram channels that actually follow through, and usually, so I'm using this browser is not Chrome. This is actually MSH. So in MSH, there's a translate to English. Basically, I just translate, just 2 clicks away. Now everything is in English. I can now read all Russian and Ukrainian sources. This is how I read. So if not, I have no.
That also.
If not, I have no means to understand what the hell they are writing about. And
I was saying Chrome also has the translate to English feature.
Yeah, I don't use Chrome because when I do search, it will come out in Google, and I don't really like Google search because Google search is now skewed. They no longer give the best information. They are now unbalanced. For example, if you want to search anything about Trump, it's always going to be anti-Trump. For example, it's not going to be balanced yet. So that's my observation, and I made the hard decision to actually just quit Chrome.
Yeah, I mean Google's NATO. I mean Google's headquartered and ran in NATO countries mostly. So obviously there's censor. I was just mentioning that the translate feature also exists on Google Chrome. But please continue.
Yeah. So for example, so when I look at a piece of information, what I look for is where are they, and what are they doing. Typically, that's what I try to find. So for example, when they say, they are rescuing people in Mariupol, this, okay, I will ignore. Then after that, they'll say, fire a Tushka missile at Luhansk, I will ignore. This, because all this, so that's why I come back to this point. The only thing I care about is who capture what, and everything else that happens in the war happens in the war. People die, things get destroyed, civilians die, and this happens in every single war. So this the propaganda of either side, both of them will always emphasize about the residential building got destroyed, that old woman got killed because of this indiscriminate shelling and stuff. So these are all propaganda. So about propaganda,
we are doing news. I'm saying that it would be relevant to have a casualty count, and maybe say you can't accurately have it, but it certainly be relevant as news reporting a casualty count and weapons destruction, building
correct.
destruction. I mean, I don't know if that'd be too complicated for you to add.
Correct. So I want to. So what is propaganda? Propaganda is just simply a piece of information that is presented to you to elicit an action, an emotion, or an opinion. So that is propaganda, which means that a propaganda can be totally factual, 100% true, and even something that is 100% true can be propaganda, because the idea of propaganda is simply to influence you. So for example, like this kind of pictures or whatever, they strike residential buildings. They are talking about the Ukrainians striking Donetsk. They are trying to make you feel that the Ukrainians are shelling indiscriminately. But if you look at the Ukrainian side of the propaganda, they are saying the exact same thing. So this is all propaganda. This is why sometimes in my channel, some people get confused because I just say the Russian propaganda or the Ukrainian propaganda. Then I say like, how can you say that's propaganda? Propaganda doesn't mean it's fake. It can be entirely true. Just that it's always picked. They nitpick what they want to show you. So, for example, in your news, in your daily news in your country, or in your respective country, is the same. They only have a half an hour news to talk, and then they only dedicate maybe 5 to 10 minutes to talk about Ukraine war, and then they can only show you limited amount of information. The piece of information that they show you is specifically picked to 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 have a narrative, to push an opinion on you, so that you will have a perception of what the war is. So typically in like even in Singapore where we are pro-West, all the information is always from the Ukrainian, usually is from the Ukrainian side. And then it's always Ukrainian buildings get destroyed. It's always a missile hitting a Ukrainian building, and you can see Ukrainian refugees. You will never see anything from the Donetsk side, from the Russian side. You will never see Russian soldiers giving humanitarian aids to the civilians on the ground. That is the reality. So even the news that you're watching, those are also propaganda, because they will never give you the full clear picture of what is actually happening on the ground. And the reality is they are not able to give you the full clear picture on the ground, because, for example, every day that I update, I go through 5 hours of reading. So I will have to go through and scroll through. I will actually have to read everything, because sometimes I don't even know what is this about that I have to read. And then by the time I read through everything, and then sometimes I feel that there is not enough information, because I can read through 3-4 hours of stuff and then I have nothing to update on here, which is what happened yesterday. Then I got literally nothing to update. I only have like 1, 2, and 3 explosions, and nothing else was updated on the map. But I spent 5 hours on it, and so I can read through all these things, and then if I can't find the information that I believe is happening, for example, I'm expecting some push in, for example, Mykolaiv front. There's supposed to be something happening here, but I didn't see it. Then I start to go to Twitter to find. So what I do is that when I go to Twitter, so for example, I will just search for Kherson. I click for the latest information, and then I start scrolling and start reading. So usually, for example, Russian column reported in Kherson. So sometimes they will have more specific. They will like be a specific village or town, and then I will immediately search where is the location, and sometimes then I will mark. For example, maybe there's a Russian troops here, so Russian spotted. This is an example, and then I will just change it to red, and then I put it a truck, and then I will just mark it there. And sometimes this information can be just a one-liner like this, and then I will just mark it there. The idea is not that this is true or false, but it's mostly giving us a general picture of what's actually happening. And sometimes, for example, they will say, oh, the Russians have taken, for example, Voznesensk, for example. I can always indicate that first, and then I can debunk it later if I found information that is not true. But at least we have the latest the latest best information about the war, and that's how I actually updates the map. So some of the information, sometimes like if you look at for example, day 1 versus day 7. Let me disable the latest one. Oh, sorry, it's a bit clunky, too many points. So you can see that the border is actually different, because when the war started, I have a wrong information, or I have a misunderstanding of the border, and then I actually correct it as I go along. So this is how I operate. So as I iterate, I actually get the best possible situation, the actual situation on the ground, just by iterations. So that's why sometimes during my stream, or not stream, I mean during my videos, I actually tell people, do not believe me 100%, because my information might be false. Sometimes you can have all the Russian information, all the Russian sources, all saying the same thing, but they might be wrong, because one person heard it from another, and then all of them actually have the wrong information. And then I plot it into the map, and then the entire information is actually all false. That could be possible. And that actually is very common for Ukrainian information. So for example, a few days ago, or a week ago, there is supposedly a massive major counteroffensive by the Ukrainians on this part of in the northwest and west side of Kiev. And then I actually tried to, this is when I went to find the fire map, because I really cannot find information on that. I really cannot find any signs that there is a massive counteroffensive. So I started to look at the fire map, and I saw a lot of fire all over the place. So then I made this assumption that maybe those are actually signs of fighting. So then after that, 1-2 days later, I started to invalidate my own theory, because I started to find even more information. Like I found satellite imaging, and then I found that
was fascinating. So are there? I mean, I didn't look into that, but so there's satellite like public imaging that just tracks fires. I don't know what country or some NGO funds that just has satellites that monitor fires and make it public access.
Yes, it's public access. So this, for example, this was what I used to use, which gave me all the wrong information. As in, they got very good information about the fire, but it will make you think that there's actually a war fighting in Russia as well. So this is the kind of like misleading information that I accidentally gave to the world. And then what happened was that I found a better source, which was the actual satellite imaging. And so when I actually found this,
the west coast of America had huge forest fires, possibly due to global warming or climate change. But I'm in Michigan, which has a ton of water, so we had like rain and flooding. But the west coast and had extreme drought and forest fires. So I've seen some of these imagings used for the news last summer covering those fires. But it's kind of ingenious to use that for trying to figure out what's happening militarily.
So, for example, you see that based on a certain bandwidth, they can actually see the fire through the clouds. And then after that, I start to realize that a lot of the fire that I thought was fighting could just actually be forest fires. Although it could be started by fighting, but it doesn't a big fire doesn't indicate a big fight. So after that, I invalidated the entire theory about using fire map, and I don't really use it anymore. Other than just to verify certain information, sometimes I feel that I need to, but otherwise I don't use that anymore. Then I deleted everything. Then I started to just go back to the traditional way of just looking for information through all these chatters.
If you're a military historian, I believe that World War I, World War II, even going back in the Napoleonic Wars, that the Russians burned their own fields in territories that they thought they were going to lose.
Correct.
It's unlikely that would be what they're doing today, but if you just stray missiles or something that might start fires or random, if the fire department or infrastructure is inactive, that random forest fires can't be put out now.
But in fact, this scorched earth strategy is actually being used by the Ukrainians. So every time they retreated from a certain city and village, especially in Donbass area, they actually destroyed as many things as they can, especially when it comes to amenities and maybe electricity and all these things. So that's, but of course, I'm not saying that for a fact. I'm just saying that the Russians reported that the Ukrainians have been destroying everything as they go. There are also accusations that the Ukrainians actually shoots the civilians or people that probably see something that they should have saw, and they actually murdered them before they leave the territory. And so of course this is, you can say it's Russian propaganda. I have no idea.
God forbid the Russian correspondent claimed that the theater bombing that could have been a mass casualty event wasn't done by Russia. It was done by Ukrainians, and
correct.
We might never get to the bottom of that. I don't know if your research is
the drama theater, right? The one that you're talking about is the drama theater, the one at Mariupol, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest one in the news, and supposedly the children on the outside, and God forbid,
Correct.
even the president of the U.S. is accusing Putin of war crimes, and God forbid it could have been a mass casualty event. Although the
Correct.
Russian minister said that it wasn't them that did that; it was the Ukrainians themselves. God forbid.
So the interesting thing was that I think in Germany or somewhere, they actually wrote the same thing where the Russian word children on the floor in front of I think a museum or something to kind of like illustrate to kind of protest the Russian invasion. But that also shows that the word children can be written by anyone. That's my point. So at the drama theater, I believe it's somewhere. It's in the I have no idea. It's here. So this is a drama theater. They actually wrote the word children in front here. So they were hoping that the Russian pilots will see it and they will not bomb this building. But who says you're always going to bombard using an aeroplane, right? You can always bombard with artillery. So the artillery is not going to see that word. So that makes not a lot of sense. So, and another thing is because of the protests in Germany where France, I'm not sure which country, they wrote the word children on the floor. That also shows that anyone can write that. It can be written by the Azov battalion or the Ukrainian forces within Mariupol, and they use this as a HQ. So this become a protection for them. And that could also be possible. How do we know? So there's another theory.
I found mostly Israel-Palestine, but the common case of all warfare is when you're on the defensive side that has an imbalance of weaponry or power, that it's a good strategy, God forbid, to hide among civilians. So you find that when Israel's incursions into Lebanon or Gaza, that people will fire from civilian areas, and then they'll retreat into the civilian areas, hoping to not be fired upon. And a lot of times they will fire upon them, and that's why you have such large casualty rates of civilians, like in Palestine. And certainly if it's guerrilla warfare, there really is nothing you can do besides fire from civilian areas.
Because it's not natural to human nature, right? To run into the open where they can shoot you better. You would run into a place where you know that they will not shoot you. So this is so similarly in this war, it is absolutely believable
that claim that the hospital that was bombed was actually being used for weapons, that they were even firing from the hospital, and then Russia bombs the hospital, saying the hospital wasn't in use, it had been taken over by the military, and then the propaganda so that's similar to war in all situations, specifically to my audience who follows Israel-Palestine, that every single battle, even God forbid, the Naftali Bennett, the prime minister of Israel, has 100 civilians that someone fired missiles from right outside of the UN camp, and then they fired and then retreated into the UN camp, and they fired at them in the UN camp there and killed 100 civilians.
But which offensive force will actually do something so stupid, right? To actually demonize themselves. So that's why for an offending force or invading force to actually strike something like a hospital, I'm sure they actually think through it carefully before they actually do something like this. So
they might not. They're saying they're getting missiles fired at them, and I mean they might have. I'm sure they have mapping, but it's saying like no, they just know that someone's firing at them from this area, and then they return fire. And from a defensive strategy, okay, the hospital's been shut down, or if the military or schools, that the defensive missiles firing from civilian areas is, God forbid to say, a good strategy. And then from the offense, they're just trying to destroy military targets. So what's a military target? Well, obviously someplace where they're firing from you is a military target. So that's just common in all wars. I mean, hopefully we'll talk a little bit, but that's common. Anyone who follows Israel-Palestine, but all military situations, that they'll be common. They'll commandeer civilian areas, fire from it, and then there'll be return fires, and maybe they knew, maybe they didn't, maybe they knew and didn't care, or so it's tough to know.
Correct. So that's why, for example, for Israel and Palestine is a bit different because the fighting is always when people are still living normal lives. But in Ukraine, it's a very different situation because you know there's an invasion force coming, and they did not arrive at Mariupol for I think 2 weeks. Or I believe it's 2 weeks around there. So you have plenty of time to actually know. Let me see, day 7. Sorry, you have 1 week. You have 1 week to actually evacuate the city of civilians. You already know that they are coming, but why are there still so many civilians in the city? I mean, this is
God forbid that.
question, right?
Yeah, I want to put yourself in that situation. Like, certainly there was a lot of Jews in Mariupol, and from what I saw, like almost no one evacuated until the bombs started falling. They knew about it. Israel and Jewish organizations made the opportunity for almost everybody to leave, and they said almost no one left until the bombs started falling. And then once the bombs started falling, it became increasingly difficult. And you could say, like with Palestine or any situation, a certain amount of people will choose to die, then leave. Expect old people or just people that is saying like, this is my land. So
correct. But the problem is we did not even see an evacuation. The evacuation of Mariupol by the government on a deliberate evacuation of the civilians, knowing that the Russians are moving in.
Well, it's not their strategy is obviously to keep the civilians. Because if they evacuate, they're going to lose the territory. So if obviously Ukraine army is not doesn't stand much chance against the Russian army. So if they evacuate and just the remnants of the Azov battalion or Ukrainian army to fight the Russians, they would lose extremely badly. So that's the alleged. It's like Palestine. It's the question of civilian casualties and world diplomacy that they're saying like, well, if you're going to take it, you're going to have to, God forbid, kill a bunch of civilians. And how much can Russia handle the diplomatic fallout from so many civilian casualties?
So on top of that is that we all in this war, as particularly we keep seeing the news reporting the Russians hit a school, hit a kindergarten, and hit a hospital. Then so I always in my videos I always say, who the hell go to school in a war? No one go to school in a war. So no one will send your kids to the kindergarten in the middle of a war, especially when you know that the fighting is just nearby. So but you see, the media will always or the Ukrainians will actually keep repeating this. And I'm talking about Ukrainian government. They actually keep saying that the Russians hit the kindergarten, or hit a position that the kindergarten is just 10 meters away. I mean, this is all nonsense because a building is a building. In the middle of a war, no one go to school, and every building is a building. And usually schools are actually the best place for any military force to actually rest, because they have it's not owned by anyone. It's not a home, so you are not invading into people's home, and then you have plenty of space for you to put your stuff and rest and sleep. So it's very normal, I believe, for military to actually make use of the school compounds to actually use as a tactical HQ or to rest or as a field hospital. All is very possible. So that's why this. So I always encourage people to just put things into context. No one go to school in a war, and by right there shouldn't be patients in the hospital anymore. By this point of time, if they are still there, then you know that the hospital is not doing their job to evacuate people away from a war zone. But somehow we still have the pregnant woman, video that came out from the hospital, and I don't know what to think about that. So for me, I go through so much stuff. I see a lot of dead bodies, a lot of tragedies, and I just have to detach myself from it, because if not, then it's not possible to go through. Which is what happened to me when I was covering the Myanmar conflict, because the Myanmar one was just one-sided. It was not even two-sided. It's not like like this war. You see Russian tragedies, you see Ukraine tragedies. The Myanmar war was just one-sided. It's just all the way civilian casualties, and then just see the junta just killing people, burning villages, and I went from day to day coverage to week because I cannot stand it. Then after that, I just stopped the entire thing altogether because I was busy with work. Yeah.
So I saw you covered today some of the negotiations about. I'm not sure if you want to. You could even screen share that what the Russians are demanding, what the Ukrainians are demanding.
Okay,
And
let me.
what kind of considering you're covering this so much, what type of prognosis do you have of likely to happen?
Okay, let me just share a bit. So in terms of the Russians, what they want, I think everybody knows. They want Luhansk and Donetsk to be independent.
Well, not here in America, because God forbid the media is kind of strawmanning what the
Okay,
claims of what they want. So
so if
most
your viewers
people in
don't know,
America think that what they want is to recreate the Russian Empire, or just some sort of emotional adolescent backlash against and so unfortunately, like no, even the best papers like the New York Times or the aren't accurately reporting that.
because they are they are viewing this war in a colored lens, in a like a superhero villain. Look at Russia. This is Russia. Would they want this? It's like they have so much. They have so much resources. They actually don't need more land. In fact, they don't want more trouble. Put it that way. Absorbing even a bit of Ukrainians is actually problems for themselves. So the only these two parts, I believe they will end up maybe annex them like Crimea, but these are all majority Russians. Like mostly they are just Russian people. These are Russian speakers, and they have families in Russia. So this is the places where they might still annex. But if you look at Russia, it's just like United States. They are actually self-sufficient in all resources. They do not need to. They can literally just go for another 1,000 years, and they don't need to import anything. Just like USA. USA is also largely self-sufficient. Even gas and even oil. United States has the capability to actually go self-sufficient in terms of oil. Trump's administration proved that. So which is why Russia and United States are the superpowers of the world, because they are the only countries that can be self-sufficient. They can be detached from the entire world, and they can still manage to build up a massive military with high-tech military technologies, which China can't do, because China is not self-sufficient. They have no oil. They do not have enough food for their massive population. They need to import a lot of things, and that creates vulnerability for China that they have to deal with geopolitically. They have no choice. For Russia, they don't trade. Yes, they will be poorer, but they won't die. They won't die of hunger. China will. That's how the Qing dynasty fell, because the people get sick of it, because they are always hungry, they are poor, they are struggling, and then that's why they overthrew the Qing dynasty. But I think all around the world, maybe Australia still have a chance to be self-sufficient. I think they are self-sufficient, but there is not a lot of countries that can go totally without trade, and Russia happens to be one of them. And to say that the Russians are the kind of like the evil guy that want to conquer everything, I mean, that is obviously, to me, is a colored lens. But if you would say they want to exert influence on their neighbors, that's for sure. That's for sure, because they are a superpower. To me, they are a superpower. And even for United States do exactly the same thing. And I think many people has pointed out that not Canada and Mexico cannot do anything without United States approval. Put it that way. It's like Donald Trump just pushed through the cancellation of NAFTA, and then they have nothing. They can't do anything, and then they have to come out with a totally new trade deal, right? So despite the original trade deal was beneficial to Canada, so that's the reality of living beside a superpower, and that's what Ukraine was ignoring. They ignored the geopolitical realities, and they tried to force their way into NATO, and then the war happened. I'm not saying that the Russian is right to invade, but that's the reality. So
what about the claims of human rights abuses by the Ukrainians? That even I play chess internationally, and Russians are very prominent in chess, and they seem adamant that that God forbid Ukrainians have been committing civil rights abuses. I mean, human rights abuses against Russians, and that's basically the reason for the conflict, and the conflict can't be ended because it's at least in their claim, protecting the weak. I mean, God forbid, I showed you the UNS report, which also Google doesn't like that. God forbid, videos of possibly people being tortured for Ukrainians being tortured for not wanting to join the army, for fleeing, for stealing bread, and then possibly torture of captured Russian soldiers. I mean, how do you view? What's your understanding? Is it possible the Ukrainians are God forbid committing serious human rights abuses?
So we look. So from how I analyze this is that I look always from the motivation. So how do the Russians look at this war and how the Ukrainians look at this war? The Russians look at this war as liberators. They are the good guys. They are here to destroy the neo-Nazis or the Nazis or the actual Nazis. And that's why when the soldiers came in, and then they actually, every frontline force is followed by a humanitarian force just behind them. So every time they liberate someplace, so-called liberate someplace, and they push forward, the humanitarian force convoy will come in and they start to help the civilians bring food, and then they will actually try to restore water, electricity, and stuff. And that's what you don't see in the Western media. That's what the Russians are doing. Every fighting force is always followed by a humanitarian force. This applies to Melitopol, in Kherson, even in all these places, even in Kiev. There are videos coming up for all these things. So so we just try to understand the motivation. But in the Ukrainian point of view, this is a total war. This is a war of survival. The Russians see this as just a limited war. They just a special operations for them to just do something that they think is the right thing to do. But the Ukrainians see this as a total war, and they behave like a total war. They hand out weapons to anyone. Then they actually have martial law. They forbid all men to leave the country, and they started wrapping people onto lampposts for stealing, and you can see this kind of behavior is that means the law and order kind of have broken down a bit, if you ask me. If it's not a lot, maybe at least a bit, where people are taking law and order into their own hands, and this is not a good sign. And then as we go to and then when you look at the narrative that there are certain extremist right wingers or extreme right wingers or neo-Nazis within within the military, elements of them. I'm not saying the Ukrainian force is all Nazis. I'm talking about there are elements of them within the military, and we have showed it, and it's been proven by videos and photos of the captured Azov battalion soldiers where they have all the Nazi tattoos and all these things. Is for sure they exist, and it was actually widely reported since 2014 that the neo-Nazism is happening, far right wing elements in Ukraine. All these are widely reported by even credible medias, and somehow it's totally forgotten nowadays. And given all this context, it is possible that there are certain elements of people within the Ukrainian military that might actually commit a war crime in terms of torturing of a prisoner of war, especially if you have been under 30 days of bombardment. You'll be so pissed with your enemy, the invaders, that you will actually do anything to him, and that is actually believable as well. So especially in Mariupol, or you are in some of these eastern front lines, or maybe even around here where you just have so much frustration, you just vent it on the person that you managed to catch. So I mean, this is war, so anything happens in war. So of course I think there might be atrocities on the Russian side as well, because some of them just hate some of these neo-Nazis so much. Who knows what they did to them? We are only so I always tell people, everything that you see online is what people want you to see. Similarly, on the TV and on newspaper, you are only seeing things because they want you to see it, not because that is the truth or that's a fact. So most of the truth and facts is actually hidden. We do not know what are they. We are only seeing what people want us to see. So that's why 90% of the things are all propaganda.
So how do you think this will play out over the next few months? I mean, you think that they're going to try to take and hold the east and you possibly up to the Dnipro River. You think that they'll go for Odessa?
Um, from my point of view is rather conservative, if you put it that way. They are definitely going to go through Izium. They already captured Izium. They are likely to go to Bavinkov, and then they will actually do this encirclement to basically go along the border of Donetsk and encircle whoever Ukrainian forces is within this area, which I always call them the East Army. So they'll likely go along the border and encircle this entire force. I heard a lot of people say that it's like 60% of the Ukrainian regular force. I have no idea if that is true, because I don't track the units. So, but definitely there's a significant amount of Ukrainian forces over here. So this is what I think they will happen once they capture the entire of Donetsk region, which is this border here. Once they capture the entire thing, I believe the Russians will be in a much better negotiation position, which is why I don't really believe in the negotiations happened yesterday, because the Russians are not ready to actually negotiate properly, because they haven't achieved their objective here, and the Ukrainians are putting out nonsensical demands that I think
Why do you think they haven't went for Odessa yet, or do you think they're not going to? Or do you think that it's possible that they will eventually go for Odessa?
Once the entire Ukrainian military apparatus collapse, I think they will. At this moment, I don't think they will, because this is so out of place, right? You see, the action is all around here. It's the resources and the supply routes is all here, because it's all about the East Army now. The East Army is the prime focus is that the entire line of defense is heavily entrenched. Just think World War I kind of entrenchment. It's trench warfare all the way, and it's heavily entrenched. And it's not just one line; it's defense in depth, multiple lines of defenses. So you can defeat one line of defense. There's another line of defense right behind it, and that's what happened as particularly clearly, in the west of Donetsk, where you can literally see the trenches around here. Let me see. There are trenches. Let me see. How do I show you the trenches? I believe these are all trenches. There's a lot of the entire area is just.
I've seen videos. I'm saying that they'll have to be siege where they'll have to encircle around the encampment, and you basically starve them out.
But they can't even starve them out, because it's a congruent line of defenses. It's just one line. It's the same as World War I, where it's just one entire long line of defenses. So you can't even do encirclement. So that's why
there's a point of attacking Kiev is not necessarily because they want to take Kiev, but because they want to cut the supplies. And if they could start going down the Dnipro River, they could cut all the supplies coming to the east.
So a lot of the theories that I believe is right is that the forces around here and here, they are just there to take attention away from the East Army. That means they are actually trying to hold Ukrainian forces in this area so that they cannot reinforce the Eastern Front, because the Eastern Front on its own now is already so hard to defeat. And I believe this is the reason why the Russians chose this highly risky way of fighting, by opening 5 different fronts, by 1, 2, then 3, and 4. So they fought towards Kharkiv, they fought towards this Sumy area, they fought towards Kiev. All this is just to draw Ukrainian forces away from the Eastern Front as much as they can. This do not allow reinforcement to go to the Eastern Front. And without that reinforcement, they are still struggling so hard to break the defenses here. So this is not a joke. This is a really powerful defense by the Ukrainians. And why I say it's World War I is because in World War I, the entire stalemate was broken by tanks. The new invention of tanks managed to break through the trenches, and they managed to end the war. But in modern day, even the tanks cannot get past the trenches because of all the anti-tank missiles. The individuals, one single soldier with an anti-tank missile can take out a tank, which means that we go back to World War One kind of war where it's just trench warfare all the way. Even with tanks, you can't really bash through all these defense line. And this is the reality of the war here. So when people say, no, the Russians are so slow, they are not moving fast enough, I think they are mistaking that we are mistaking and misjudging the situation. It is the Ukrainians are doing so well that the Russians are not able to move because of
It'd be years. Even I saw some of the refugees were being told that they wouldn't go back for years. Or, I mean, they might permanently lose their property also. Like, God forbid, saying, okay, like, why don't you want to leave? Because if you leave, you might leave everything. You might be likely to lose everything that you have. But, you know, like Israel, Palestine, long-time occupations are extremely difficult, and people's will to fight doesn't really die out. That you know, as long as people are occupied, they'll probably fight. But in terms of supplying major military, I mean, do you foresee this possibly being years?
I don't think so,
That'll
because
be like Israel, Palestine, where you know, just there'll be regular flare-ups of violence or occupational status.
That might happen. That might happen. That, which is why the Russians have been really careful dealing with the Ukrainian leadership. I mean, the Russians technically have the weapon to instantly kill the entire leadership of the Ukrainians instantly in the first day of war. They have the weapons, they have the means, but they don't, because they need a political closure to this conflict, which is why they are keeping the leadership alive. And I think they are not even in Kiev now.
And some people also claim that they're purposely trying to depopulate it, that Russia strategically goal is to depopulate eastern Ukraine, force the people to either take their side or leave.
I feel that is just a side effect of war. It's a side effect of war. So I'm not sure how much.
I mean, their leaders, it's unclear who's leading or their strategy, but I mean that when they went into it, if they had thought it through, that depopulation may have been one of the initial strategies that you know, they didn't necessarily share with us, but they had thought through.
I think the depopulation is not the target of the depopulation. I don't think it's the eastern of Ukraine. I think it's the western of Ukraine. So, because the western Ukraine is actually where the so-called the Ukrainians are, whereas the Ukrainian speaking people are. So if you say depopulating, they will want to depopulate the western side. A bit like, you know, what happened in Palestine kind of situation, where they all just leave and then they just go to Europe and work and live there. After that, they will send money back to the old people here. I think that might be what happened, you know, just like what happened in the West Bank. But if you talk about eastern side, is not so clear, because Luhansk and Donetsk people, they wanted their own country, or at least their own republic, and then they want to join Russia because they are sick of the people in Kiev. And so to depopulate this area, I don't think so, because these people are the ones that are fighting most of the fighting in the Eastern Front. So most of the Eastern Front here, the battles are actually fought by the people who are living in Donetsk and Luhansk. They are the mobilized troops from this area, and they are the people who have been fighting for 8 years in this civil war. So in this part, I don't think they will want to say depopulate. The people in Kherson area also, I don't know. Maybe some of them are pro-Ukrainians. You may want to migrate after getting annexed. I don't know. This area, I really not so sure. I mean, this is just a theory of people saying, but it's a war. Once the war happened, there's a refugee wave moving away from the front lines, and I don't think that is something very unique.
One of my regular viewers asking about Dugin, I guess Alexander Dugin, his statement, Russia alone is a regional power, but Russia plus Ukraine is an empire. And I thought about that because you talk about group strategy. Sometimes religion is a group strategy. And to some extent, if Russians and Ukrainians have the same group strategy, to look at it as like Russia and Ukraine in on this together, is it possible that Ukraine will look towards the West and be like, well, you didn't help us enough, and now we're going to side with Russia? And
no,
see some sort of greater.
Not going to happen. No, it's not going to happen. The future Ukraine the neo Ukraine, regardless how small it becomes, maybe half the country left, maybe the other half of the country is all becomes tiny countries. I don't know. The post-war Ukraine will be highly anti-Russia, for sure. It's like
Well, is it
super
possible they could turn and become anti-Europe, anti-NATO, and the Ukraine be like, we tried to side with Europe, and they didn't help us, and we remember, how they turned a blind eye to our suffering and didn't do enough to help us. So now we're going back to side with the Russians against Europe. And
okay, so I don't think so. It's because that's where all the money is. They want the trade. They want that glamour, the glitz. That's
well,
the entire reason why they wanted.
Millions of Ukrainians move west as refugees.
Correct.
That would that could become a weakening force to Europe in general. And then if Ukraine ends up having anti-Western sentiments, the fact that they've just taken millions of their refugees could weaken Europe further.
I mean, the European countries are going to pay for it, for hosting the refugee, for sure, because it's not cheap to feed so many people. But because they host all these refugees, right? So they are going to be pro-West for sure. They will think that, all these Western countries actually save us. So if they want it,
really, I mean, a lot of people oppose immigration in general, but it's like, no, I'm saying people immigrate to the other country and then they have no century towards where they came from, and it weakens the country. Just like, sort of say Muslims come to Europe. Correct. And then then God forbid could be involved in terrorism or promoting Islam, that they don't necessarily appreciate the West for taking them in. They end up turning against the West and waging war internally from the West, that even Ukrainians could conceivably, like Muslim refugees, turn against the West and internally wage war against Germany and France from the inside.
It is possible if the Ukrainian situation is not closed properly. That's why I feel if Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, mess it up and then cause the Ukraine to turn into a failed state, then I think that could happen, because all these people will be stranded.
Well, so he's almost guaranteed to blame it on the West. So if Zelensky fails, I mean, God forbid if he's martyred, but if he fails and you just becomes a mouthpiece for Ukrainians, if it doesn't work out the way they think, that they basically cast all the blame on NATO and try to you blame the failure on NATO, and then all of the Ukrainians thinking, what do we do now that we're in a failed state and we've lost the war? That it could become beneficial to I don't know, to try to weaken Western Europe.
So that I'm not sure, because there's so many variables, right? So, for example, what if in post-war Ukraine, the Russians actually pour in a lot of aids and loans and to rebuild the country instead of the Western countries? Then the perception might change, because ultimately, a lot of the Ukrainians are starting to realize that the Russians are not really particularly aiming at civilians, and they are, because they have already saved so many people and provided humanitarian aids. They have a lot of alibi of the Russians being not so bad. So that's why all this is in flux. But in terms of the negotiations, this Ukrainian government has gone all in. So even until these few days, they are still portraying themselves as they are still winning the war. They are still inflicting huge amount of damage and hurt on the Russian forces. So
I think it's only posturing to the West, saying that, is that really what Ukrainians are telling themselves, or that's only what they're telling Western media because they think that somehow this is going to get them in with the West, and that's why saying that the pushback, if they lose the war, it's clearly a failed state, that they'll blame the West, and even it's tough to gauge the opinions of Ukrainians in Ukraine.
I think the one saying was that because they have to look stronger, so that the West will still continue to give weapons, because if they are too weak, then nobody feels the need to give them weapons because the war has been lost. So that's one of the theories that was out there, and that does make sense. But however, because they are doing this, they are leaving themselves no way backwards. They cannot retreat from their words of all this bravado saying that they are so strong, they're so good, the Russians are failing, the soldiers are defecting, and all these things. And if you put that kind of narrative, and then you go into the negotiations, how are you going to compromise to what the Russians want? It's not possible. Which is why I was
my possible, God forbid, conspiracy prediction that they'll do that by blaming the West and turning against the West and saying that okay, you're the one who convinced us to wage this stupid war against Russia. You're the one who said was going to help us. You're the reason we lost the war, and that you're just saying that the like a sine function, it could swing back to the other side if things start getting worse, and then Ukrainians might be in their interest to try to blame everything on the West.
I'm sure they would do it eventually, maybe after the war. Not during the war, because they still need the weapons. They are demanding the weapons as if everyone owe them weapons. So
that's why you think this is going to go on for years or months. It's saying that, I mean, if the war is still going on for years, or if in a month it's going to be over, and then Ukraine's going to have to decide what they're going to do, if they're going to surrender, if they're going to how they're going to handle that.
Tentatively, I feel that it's going to be ending in months, not years. Because the West is unable to finance this war for the long run. They are having a lot of economic issues now because of the inflation and because of the overprinting of money all around the world, especially the US. And then now they have this gas issue, right, with Russia, where if the Russia cut the gas, then all the economies around here is going to be heavily battered, and that will cause a lot of political mayhem. A lot of the ruling parties are going to be overthrown. So, and once they are overthrown, support for the Ukraine war will instantly end, because no one is going to care about someone that is so far away. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Just like in Southeast Asia, Myanmar is suffering. Most of us don't really care, actually.
Yeah, I've had you here over an hour, and think we got over 20 people watching. It's important. We probably talk about this many hours. I encourage everybody watching to migrate to Wyatt's platform for his regular updates. So that's why I brought him on, because it was some of the best information I'd found. So let's at least try to talk a little bit about geopolitics, Asia, wider implications. The fact that you're in Singapore, the Far East, certainly means you have a different perspective on this. And everyone here is talking about the Russian-China alliance. I'm not sure how does Singapore is one of the countries worried about increasing China's influence and teaming up with NATO and the West to try to limit China, or that also is a situation that you're actually better off with China than than NATO and the West.
So if you're talking about
how with Russia, how does this fit into it?
So in particularly for Singapore, we are always been this so-called gateway between the East and the West. So we have been very friendly with China. In fact, I would term it as we are the only real friend China have. Like in terms of all the countries, right? We are the only friend that they have. No one else is actually friends with them. They are all of them are just afraid of them, or they are just their little buddy, But we are the only true friend. Unfortunately, this situation had changed since Singapore have over pushed the issue of South China Sea around 2015, 2016. We have been pushing about this issue that this is actually international water, and the Chinese took offense to it. And from then on, we are actually not in a very good kind of relationship. In fact, if you know the Belt and Road Initiative, so in 2016, they had this massive convention in China to talk about Belt and Road. They invited all the leaders all along the Belt and Road, and then the people like Aung San Suu Kyi, all the top leaders are there. But they purposely did not invite Singapore. Like, it was a very glaring standout that Singapore was not invited, and it was a major sign and signal of Singapore that you are now our enemy. And that's what happened in 2016. So luckily, Trump got elected, and then Trump started a trade war, and then China kind of panicked, and then they started to be friends with everyone again. Because in 2016, Singapore is not the only one that was under pressure. They were pressuring Taiwan. They cut off tourists to Taiwan. They cut off tourists to South Korea. and South Korea was also heavily damaged. They were bullying Philippines. They are putting pressure on the Natunas Islands. So China was doing a lot of things in 2016 because of the perceived weakness of United States, and the projected victory of Hillary Clinton. In fact, even in Singapore, our leaders thought that Hillary Clinton is a sure win, and then I was like, please no. Then after that, Trump won, and then they were like, oh, shit, because the prime minister publicly said that he thinks that Hillary will win. He basically put it that way, that it's not possible that Trump can actually win the election, and then that kind of caused Singapore to have no U.S. ambassadors for the entire term of Trump's tenure in the White House. So that is the situation for Singapore. And because when I say there's no friends, so that's why Russia and China is also not friends. They are actually extremely wary of each other. Especially for China, they are extremely fearful of Russia, because Russia is the only country that can destroy China. Like, not even United States. United States, they still have to sail across and they have to do amphibious landing, not so simple. But Russia can just simply roll through here and then just invade through. So China,
that's why Singapore has mandatory military service, kind of like Israel, that
yes,
they would be eaten up and swallowed by a greater power. I mean, I don't know how much you want to review the 1965 expulsion from Malaysia. Certainly Israel supplied Singapore with weapons, but the mandatory military service there is just saying that you guys got to be able to fight to be able to survive, or else you could be eaten up like the Ukraine.
So if you're more interested in terms of the Israel-Singapore relationship, so Singapore, when after independence, we are surrounded by Muslim countries because we are majority Chinese. So that means we are not majority Muslim, and that makes us a sore thumb, which is also the reason why we got kicked out of the Federation of Malaysia. So under the pressure, and then at that time Indonesia was under a dictatorship, so it was not a good time. Then so Singapore decided that we need to have a powerful military, at least to make it, to discourage anyone to try to invade us. And we actually asked for help from a lot of different countries, and including India, and all of them rejected us. Nobody wanted to help us. And then finally Israel decided to help. But because Israel is such a sensitive topic in the Muslim world, so this entire military aid, in a sense, was kept hidden for at least 30, 40 years, 50 years. So this was always been a secret. So when the Israeli soldier, the military guys come and help to set up the Singapore Armed Forces, we always refer them to as Mexicans. So we always say that it's the Mexicans that came to help us, and that's what happened during those days. Yeah, and then and the Israeli has been really good. It's very nice. They actually set a rule for themselves. They are not going to use this as an opportunity to sell weapons to Singapore. In fact, they will actually review all the weapons around the world, and then they actually pick the best weapon systems for Singapore's need. So that actually, I think, gained a lot of trust and respect from the Singapore side as well. So rather than we are just a customer, military customer, but we are actually the Israeli really cares for us, and then that's how we develop the military. And then this is also why we don't buy everything Israeli, but we form a very, very strong military alliance. We share a lot of stuff, which I don't think most of us will ever know. A lot of military tech, I think we also share with each other. I think we also maybe military research, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, Singapore is also a high, somewhat of a manufacturing base, high tech, reasonably good education. I even had classmates, University of Michigan, a reasonable amount of people from Singapore and U.S. educational institutes, mostly engineering.
From my understanding, Singapore topped the charts for education. So like the most brightest and best grades are all from Singapore.
Even
consistently in number one.
A pretty good banking sector also.
Yeah. So Singapore do whatever we can. We are so small. We are just you see, I have to zoom in so much. This is Singapore. We are so small. So the only thing that we have is human resource, to be honest, and a great position for a great port as a foundation. And then we have an air hub, we have a great port, and then we have a highly educated workforce, and that's the strength of Singapore.
We have mandatory service, which is it means that you have a standing army of, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people.
We are just slightly smaller than Germany's armed forces.
Yeah, I mean, so that's quite exceptional. Relative, I mean, South Korea does also, but I mean, same with China. There, they say that or regional threats, Muslims, that without that you could just be eaten up without being able to put up any defense.
Correct.
But you know, God forbid the price of men. You had to give, you know, you gave 6 years of your life to the state and the military. Even you know, people who just 2 years. That's even 2 years is a big chunk of your life to give to the state.
Yes. So, but I feel that it's necessary, and I think that is also part of Singapore culture. I think it's the same in Israel. Serving in the military, kind of like, it's just very Israeli kind of thing, and if you remove that, then Israel will start to feel very different. I think in Singapore it's the same. Like Singapore guys actually looks like our build is actually a bit different from our fellow counterparts from Malaysia or Indonesia. We just looks a bit more bulky. A lot more fitter, because we have this 2 years of military training that the boys and the guys from the other side, they don't have. So
like Israel, you guys wouldn't exist. Like someone would just take you over if you didn't have that. I mean, because at the end of the day, no one really wants to join the army. No parent really wants to send their kid, even if it becomes part of the culture. But it's like, you know, the existential threats where you guys just wouldn't exist if you weren't able to stand up for yourself. Like, I mean, God forbid, I think Japan and China, you know, just rolled through Singapore. You know, the British rolled through Singapore, the Japanese rolled through Singapore.
I think in the past it's a bit different because there wasn't nationalism in Singapore, but today Singapore nationalism. I mean, we are very proud country now, when we never exist before. Put it that way. So now Singapore is kind of like our own thing now. And the situation is a bit similar to Israel, but it's also not entirely similar. But because for Israel's case, they are maybe not so much now, but used to be surrounded by enemies. And going to the army means the very likelihood to see combat. In Singapore, we don't have this situation, so it's easier to convince people to go to the army, because
you're sea locked. I mean, obviously,
because we don't go to war.
Just this week there were multiple terrorist attacks, but you know, so to say, we live amongst our. I'm an American Jew, but you know, in Israel we live amongst our enemies, and even if the states like Egypt and Jordan have military peace treaties, the sentiment against Israel is extremely high.
Correct.
So in Egypt, you know, half of Egyptians have negative feelings towards Israel, even if you know, there's peace agreements or the army and governments. But yeah, I mean, you're protected by the sea, or you don't have
and we don't have the kind of animosity for us.
You're not occupying you know, people that have strong reason to be against.
So we don't have that kind of bad blood with the rest for our neighbors. There's only two neighbors, Malaysia and Indonesia, and so the only fear I believe that we used to have was that Malaysia would conquer us. I think that was the biggest fear, because previously, because under the British, how do we actually form the federation? The British made it very clear that it's actually by 4 different parties. So the bit of history about the Malaysians is that when we form the federation, it's actually by 4 different states: Malaya, Singapore, Sarawak, and Sabah. So actually, it's 4 different states forming the federation. So Singapore's the Sarawak and Sabah's condition for joining is that Singapore must be in. If I didn't remember wrongly, that only if Singapore joins the federation, Sarawak and Sabah would agree to join. Brunei almost joined, but then they withdrew. They never joined, and then after that they kicked out Singapore, and then they kind of changed the constitution, and then now every single province here become a state, and then all these single states like Terengganu, Perak, Johor, they are now the same status as Sarawak and Sabah, despite Sarawak on its own is the same size as the whole of Malaya. So this was the politics in Malaysia, and then all the power and wealth is actually concentrated on the Malaya side after they changed the constitution. So it's kind of like a political trick. So maybe that's the reason why they kick out Singapore, because with Singapore in, we will protest. We will not allow the change of the constitution. to dilute the power of Sarawak and Sabah. So now Sarawak and Sabah is just another province or state within all these many other states in Malaysia.
Yes, I think I had your hour and a half, pretty good viewership. Semi-active chat. We had like this one common troll in the chat that just puts these weird symbols. I had to delete like 69 separate accounts of. It's probably a bot of some sort that just puts these weird symbols. But let's close off by talking like the future of streaming and maybe how you could pivot from your big boom covering Russia Ukraine to say if you're monetized now. I was recommending that you could try live streaming. You thought maybe to hire correspondents, and just because you're in the English language, the world's eyes are on Ukraine. Even like you think Israel supporting Singapore strategic move, but even in Israel, Singapore, the alliance is not well known to most Israelis. So there's a decent amount of Israelis that travel east and know about that. But as compared to Ukraine, everyone's eyes on Ukraine. So you're really getting the viewership up from your good coverage of that. And I'm not sure if I was mentioning that DMs that they maybe be able to try to pivot to larger coverage, and because you have a unique style of reporting using the map, the global information systems, and like people who care about geopolitics, world affairs, everything's important. But like you said, propaganda, narrative, there's a reason why we're being told things, and it's because generally they want us to act in a certain way, and that's there's a reason why Ukraine is in the news every day, and Singapore is hardly ever mentioned in the news. I can't even think the last time Singapore was mentioned in U.S. news, and even in Israeli news, where there's a reasonably strong partnership. That Singapore's basically never mentioned in Israeli news.
So for the future of DPA, right? So we used to cover all the things all over Asia, as much as my resources can help, because my coverage is actually rather erratic, because it really depends whether I'm free. So you can see some of the things.
You have to run your regular business. I mean, basically, you were doing this.
Yeah, I have to feed myself. This one don't give me money.
You have to do your regular your web pages, graphic design in order to I mean, if you have a family, feed your family or expression, then you're doing this to build up your business.
Correct.
But it's possible that if this grew enough that you could make this your main business and even hire employees.
Yeah, so the idea was that the plan was always for Defense Politics Asia to actually grow to a bigger, like a proper media outlet, to with correspondents, foreign correspondents all around Asia, to help to bring back news, or at least aggregate news from all the different part of Asia, because Asia is a very big place, and it's not really possible for me to cover everything on my own. And most of this information are not in English. For example, in the Arab world or the Middle East, everything is in Arabic. So I need someone who knows that to be able to cover that side of news. And in India is their own world. Their Indian politics is crazy. It's very messy, very complicated. And I think only an Indian will understand that. So eventually, that's the direction that I want to have, to expand the team and to bring in all this information, and expand the media, and then see how we can build it into a proper, like a full-fledged media outlet. Maybe closer to maybe Channel News Asia or something like that. But it's a long way, and I need capital, I need revenue. So I was quite glad that the YouTube channel worked out. I'm not sure how far it will go. So meanwhile, I also start to inject a bit of other news into the YouTube channel, because it's not right to only talk about Ukraine, because Ukraine is not in Asia anyway. So I have to inject a bit of other news as well, so that I can
talk in English. You think if the conflict was settled today, that your viewership would go back down 90% or something like that,
100%,
50%?
For sure, unless they like me a lot. Unless they are my loyal fans and they love my voice, then
well, we find it relevant that certainly in the West or English speaking places, it's the biggest news story, and so if you're giving top coverage, people are going to turn to you for it, as opposed to even Myanmar hardly got any coverage in the U.S. even with God forbid the human rights abuses or various things, because it's just not whatever the essence of human nature, or people have the difficulties right in front of them, and so that I mean I've been talking about the Pivot East for a long time, because like I studied in Israel, I'm an engineer, I'm here in Metro Detroit, the home of automobiles, and go to tech shows, and actually before COVID-19, since COVID-19, the tech shows have been dying out, but they're like 30% Far East, that the tech sector, and even militarily, in banking, all these factors. But probably most people, it's just beyond their mental capacity or ability to change, that if you're not, you haven't put yourself to lifelong education, willing to learn new things, meet new people, that your average person is just beyond their ability to think about what's going on, so to say, in the Far East. It may be the younger generation, like here in America, they used to teach French and Spanish, but now Chinese might be is becoming almost as common as French or Spanish, and Spanish is still extremely useful here in America, but Chinese is probably more useful than French here in America. But it would have been unheard of 30 years ago for someone to take Chinese in school, but now it's maybe even more common than French.
Correct, I agree. So I lost track of thought. I don't know what you're talking about now.
I was just kind of rambling about you're just thinking, okay, I'm talking to you here in Singapore because I found your coverage in Ukraine, and like I know things about Singapore and the Far East, but I brought you on to talk about Ukraine. So I was just kind of thinking about technology and streaming and news services, where here you're this guy in a computer in Singapore giving really great coverage of what's happening in Ukraine, and thinking about the technology, what's next, or how you're going to pivot into what's next, if you want to just publicly pontificate on that. That's what Duvid, that's what I do. I like to publicly pontificate. If you build yourself into a YouTube e-personality, you'll publicly pontificate, and there'll be hundreds, thousands of people listening to your public pontifications, as opposed to just your news coverage.
So for at least for Defense Politics Asia, my hope was not for it is not to be focused on me, because I wanted to build a team. So hopefully one day that there will be someone else will be presenting the news and stuff like this, and that will free myself up to pursue my other dreams, because I'm a very greedy person. I want to do a lot of things. So but what?
So ambitious. Greedy is pejorative. You say you're very ambitious.
But not going too far. In the short term, I'm planning to start podcast for the DPA. The first one likely to be called Open Mic. It's going to be for the patrons. Because I have a few patrons joining my Patreon on DPA, and I want to allow them to have a voice. So this will be open only to patrons.
You're just roboting it, but I'm not sure if something happened to your mic. You've been roboting the last few seconds.
So can you hear me now?
Just for some reason, the mic, it's been like roboting, the voices and cutting out. I'm not sure. If
maybe it was buffering. So I'll repeat again. So I'm planning to do a podcast. Actually, two different types of podcasts. One is actually called Open Mic. It's actually for patrons on the DPA Patreon. So I will invite them to share their views and talk. It will be a very casual thing, open talking. We can talk about all sorts of things, and then I will edit out the things that YouTube don't like, and then I will put it on YouTube. I think it will be on a separate channel, because I don't want to.
That's common practice. I would say even most streamers keep their Patreon discussions private. I mean, you could make it public or discuss that with your Patreon.
Yeah, I'll definitely make them.
Most YouTubers, medias, they have Patreon conversations, and they actually keep those private. There's no reason to share that with the general public. Unless
so they will definitely know that I'm going to put it on YouTube. So I will put it to them that all this conversation, of course, the full conversation will be only be the full recording will only be on Patreon. Patreon, but then the edited version will be on YouTube. So it will be on the separate YouTube channel because the current YouTube channel is for news only. So I don't want to mix. And then there will be only another one. In the further future, I'd like to do interview people who have interesting story to share. For example, people who were former NATO soldiers fighting in Yugoslavia, and they can share information that we all never knew. This kind of thing. So, or maybe some foreign fighters that went to Ukraine can share their information.
Two directions. One would be live reporting. If you could actually get people on the ground that could fill in interviews with what's actually happening for the current event, and then a separate thing, just interviewing interesting personalities that have insights to not necessarily current events, but recent events, or just insight into politics or the things that you cover.
Tentatively, I'm definitely not going for live reporters, because the reason of having so-called boots on the ground is that I have to worry about their safety, and I think that based on their perspective on the ground, it's going to be very limited to what they see. Although of course there is a lot of benefit to that, but I don't think I don't want to risk anyone's life, especially in a war zone kind of situation. And I think, like for example, me sitting here thousands of kilometers away, I able to kind of have a good picture of what's happening in Ukraine. I believe that I'm able to aggregate news and situations all around Asia remotely, and with my staff, even though they are in their country, they don't have to risk their lives to go on the ground, unless there is specific opportunities for them to maybe interview a prime minister, interview a minister or MP. Then maybe that could be done. But in terms of, but this is only things that I'm imagining now. I'm not sure how things will go. I'm not even sure if I ever get enough revenue to actually do all these things.
For some reason, the feedback is something's happened with feedback. I can still understand you, but it's having some sort of choppy feedback. So I've had you almost 2 hours. I really appreciate you coming on, talking to us, and you're certainly sharing how you came across and reporting. Said that you're probably the best source of info I found on the Ukraine conflict. I wish you the best of success. I'm in your Discord. Maybe cooperate if you do start doing a podcast or having big panels or streams. So I guess I'll let you close it out. Any final words? Anything you want to say? Close out, and hopefully I know it's almost midnight there. It's almost noon here where I am, and thanks again for coming on. I have your YouTube, Twitter, and webpage in the description. So encourage people to migrate to. Follow on YouTube, check out your news source. People want good information of what's going on, see what you have in the future. So, close it out with any final words you want to say.
Yeah, I want to thank you, David, for inviting me on this podcast. This is probably the first podcast I got on representing Defense Politics Asia. So very grateful for the opportunity. And I also want to encourage people to actually check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Defense Politics Asia. Also check out the Discord channel. I think there's a lot of awesome people in the Discord channel. The people who are like me, they're all very moderate, they're all very logical people that they're all very realistic. And then I think the community that I managed to kind of start to build is a very unique one. And then I really enjoy seeing the conversations. There nobody throws there, nobody push the ideologies over there. It's like people just really sharing and learning from each other. I really enjoy that. So I do encourage people to join the community, and then we see where we can go from there.
Awesome. So have a lot of success, and hopefully we'll talk again. And I'll keep on checking out your media, and hopefully we'll have some talks in your Discord and see what you have coming up. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it, and blessings. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.